Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Living with and Beyond Cancer. My name is Steve Poynton from Steve Poynton Counselling and Support. This is a podcast for people who have or have had cancer. As a twice diagnosed kidney cancer patient who has been in remission for 7.5 years, I recognise the trials and tribulations of what happens next once we've finished treatment or are in long-term maintenance treatment and try and return to our lives. Before we get into today's episode, if you want to know more about myself and why I'm doing this podcast, please go back to episode 1, which was released on World Cancer Day on the 4th of February 2026. Welcome to this latest episode, where we'll be exploring the story of Ali Stripling. Before we start to hear from Ali, I'd just like to say a few words about a sponsor of the show, Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. If you're a business owner or managing a team, it's worth checking out Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. They specialise in occupational health, providing high-quality practical reports with a really fast turnaround, so you're not left waiting when you've got a live employee situation to deal with. They also offer employee assistance program, giving staff access to qualified counsellors, along with mental health and wellbeing support wherever it's needed. If you want a straightforward, reliable support that actually helps you manage your people properly, have a look at Corporate Wellbeing Solutions and email them on occhealth@corporatewellbeingsolutions.com. So, on to today's episode. Welcome, Ali. Would you like to introduce yourself, where you're from, etc., etc.?
Firstly, thank you so much, Steve, for the opportunity. My name's Ali Stripling. I am 53 and live in Reading with my husband and our dog Buddy. Oxfordshire born and bred, so strong in the arm and thick in the head, as the saying goes. And I'm here because I had anal cancer.
Okay. Do you want to take us back to the start of this, sort of what you did for a living, what life was like for you? Obviously, you mentioned your hubby and your dog, and how this journey started.
Yeah, of course. So, like most people before having a cancer diagnosis and journey, I feel very fortunate on reflection of how oblivious I was. I was happily working in the corporate world in corporate social responsibility, long career, no real health challenges. The year that I got diagnosed, we had been in Reading for a year, living in a renovation project, which is what my husband does. So he's renovating the house very slowly. And I fractured my ankle in the April, and I thought that was quite challenging, having a fever after a couple of days. And, yeah, it felt kind of out of the blue on reflection of how it came about.
So you broke your ankle. Was that any way connected to how you found out, or was that something separate?
Well, I look back now, and I'm sure we'll get into this in terms of I felt quite healthy, as an individual. I walk, I swim, I was going to the gym and a happy, outgoing individual, seeing my friends, having a good time. And basically, I fractured my ankle. And around that same time, I took some painkillers and we went on a holiday. And I noticed some changes in my bowel movements. Now, we all know that painkillers can have an impact, that can make you constipated, for example. I also got on this kind of matcha vibe that was going on, and I thought, wow, matcha can be helpful in making your bowel movement more frequent. So around this time, I started to notice that there was some kind of odd days with my bowel movements, and that is it. And I put it down to either the painkillers or the matcha, or maybe there was some other food intolerance going out. So I was, in addition to working full time, I was studying to be a menopause wellness coach. And that really looks at your nutrition as well as understanding what's happening with your hormones during perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause. And so I also started exploring, do I have some food sensitives going on where I need to eliminate some things out of my diet? And that's what I started doing. And so the fracturing of my ankle, when I look back, is like a moment of time where things were starting to change, but I put it down to other things that were happening in my life.
Yeah, I guess it feels like from what you're saying there, it potentially was sort of the start or a sign, but it also clouded what could be there. The changes were put down or maybe put down to the medication, food changes, etc., etc. So a bit of a mixed up time, I guess, if I was to put it quite simply.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I think sometimes it's really easy to go, I'll deal with this next week. I'll leave it another week and I'm sure it's fine. Maybe if I don't eat soya, maybe if I don't eat peanuts, maybe if I don't have dairy, maybe it's stress. I've had IBS when I was younger and I was having quite a stressful time at work.
But a sense, if you've got a broken bone, especially your leg, it's mobility is the struggle you've got that's real, isn't it, at that point when you can't get around as you normally would? And that becomes the focus of how quickly I can get back to walking around. And I
Mm.
guess the way you said I was quite healthy and etc. etc. I guess what I'm hearing is if you could focus on the getting back mobile, then everything else should follow in theory.
Yeah, what happened was that I started to accept it as like a new normal. And I know we hear that expression a lot after cancer, what your new normal is. But certainly during that time, I fractured my ankle. And then months went on. I went on holiday with my best friend. And I realized that I couldn't leave the apartment until I'd had two bowel movements in the morning. I suddenly started accepting that. And then on the last day of holiday, I had this 24 hours sickness, really ill, like both ends. I felt like I was dying. And I don't know how my best friend got me on the plane, really. But again, I came back and I still continue to ignore symptoms.
So how long did that go before you sort of decided I need to do something about this?
I mean, realistically, I now know that I probably had symptoms from the April and I didn't go to the GP until mid September.
Okay. And what happened when you went to the GP?
So we had a conversation, we did bloods, we did a stool sample, and I got put on the urgent 2-week pathway for a colonoscopy. So we got in the car to go to my colonoscopy on a Saturday, and I just said to my husband, "Well, someone's going to get bad news today." Like, there was no way it was going to be me. I thought I was probably celiac, you know, or colitis. I had no idea. I didn't think it was going to be cancer whatsoever. And so off we went, and we had the colonoscopy, and immediately after that, um, they called my husband. He was told that I was ready to be collected. Uh, but I'd already overheard a conversation between the doctor and the nurse whilst I was waiting on the ward coming around from the gas and air. And hoping that they weren't talking about me. They took us into a side room and told us that it was cancer. At that time, I was told that I was likely to have a stoma and that they would use surgery to remove the tumour. And then we were sent away, told that someone would reach out with next steps. And yeah, I mean, I can feel it now actually. That's still that real sort of shell shock moment, you know, and probably I'm not sure what your experience was like, Steve, but it was a very brief conversation. We heard the word cancer twice, the need for an operation, maybe treatment like such as chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and then we left.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a surreal moment, isn't it? I was an inpatient at the time when I had my diagnosis, checking for something completely different, and it was found by mistake. But you are right. There was suddenly what felt like 100 people in the room that I was in. In reality, there was probably about five.
Yeah.
You get told you've got a tumor. You're told a little bit more information, but in honesty, you stop listening once you hear you've got the tumor and you're trying to work out what that even means. I was fortunately left with a CNS at the end of the bed at the time that then explained it a little bit. But yeah, it's a very hard moment of your life, isn't it? One that I don't think could ever be replicated by anything.
Yeah. I mean, it was my dad's 80th birthday. So luckily they were on a cruise. So I came home and I had like I'm very open and honest, and I'd been sharing like a bit of my journey on LinkedIn, which is my chosen social media channel. I'd shared that I had to have a colonoscopy and, showed a picture of the stuff you need to take in preparation for it. I thought, sorry for swearing, but shit, now I need to decide on how I follow up on this. And not telling my parents until they got back from holiday because what's the point of telling them? There's absolutely nothing that they can do. And, then telling my best friend and just crying and then spending the whole time crying with my husband and then going, well, we don't even know yet what type of cancer or what stage, and you have so many unknowns, or in my situation, because we were just understandably, we were just sent home.
That must have been really difficult to just be sent home with minimal information. As you said, not what type, so you can't do any research. I mean, I would never advocate Doctor Google anyway, straight from a diagnosis, but at least you can start looking, can't you, if you've got some
Yeah.
information, but that must have
Yeah.
been quite tough.
It was quite tough, but all credit, I mean, I've got a huge amount of praise and time for the NHS so far. They've saved my life, but, what happened next was kind of, it feels almost now like a daydream in terms of, so that was the 19th of October. So we had the colonoscopy. I'd been informed that it's cancer. I then, have to have MRI and CT scan. Again, scheduled on Saturdays. They're so overwhelmed, right? So this really bizarre situation. After those two scans, I had someone rang me and to tell me that the cancer was HPV related. So it was anal cancer, not colon cancer. And they really labored this point. And I was kind of like, okay, what does that mean? And then the next step is to have a CPET scan. Um, and that will help us understand the staging, which obviously, and at this point, you don't know what any of this means, right? So I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? And she was like, well, how big the tumor is and whether the cancer spread. But the thing with anal cancer is that predominantly they go through the same treatment plan. It hasn't changed for numerous years because it is highly effective, which is a good. It's like it's a rare cancer, but I wouldn't say it was easy to treat. The the chances of going into remission are very positive. Survival rates, I think, for where I am is 60-40 for 5 years. So then we went all the way through this kind of going through scans and then waiting. And again, looking back and reflection, that all happened very quickly. You have to wait a certain amount of time for the scan results to come back and for someone to review them. You can't have certain scans really close together, as I understand it, as well. And so after the CPET scan, I was informed that I was stage 3, which means that it had spread to my lymph nodes in both my pelvis and groin, but no further, which is really, again, you get to this position when you meet other cancer survivors and you talk about what stage you are. And I'm like, oh, I'm really grateful that it was just stage 3 and in my lymph nodes. And at the time, this is very naive of me, when people say like in your lymph nodes, I was like, oh, so it's in a lymph node in my groin and in my pelvis, not realizing that it's in nodes. And you've got hundreds of them throughout your body. That's not a great sign. I know I'm smiling through it. I find that sort of part of my coping mechanism is just to smile, to try and normalize this because other people will go through it and it feels terrifying.
It's right, isn't it? When you first get all this information, it's
Yeah.
overwhelming, it's heavy, you don't it's word soup, isn't it? What does that word mean? And even I said I was told I've got a tumor. I didn't know what a tumor mean. Is that cancerous? Is it not cancerous? And you've just said an abbreviation there, and I believe of HPV, and you mentioned when we were preparing for this that it wasn't the first time you'd heard that. You'd had something as a when you were younger.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah. So when I was 27, I had cervical cells removed from my cervix, and they were precancerous and HPV was present. So HPV, the human papillomavirus, is something that affects 90% of adults. At some point, if you've had sexual intimacy, which is skin on skin contact with another human being, it's likely at some point you've had HPV. And normally, our bodies can flush that out. And there's lots of different variants of HPV as well. And it can just go completely unnoticed, doesn't do any harm. But unfortunately, for some people, it can cause cancers. And so there's like 6 cancers that are related to HPV, but mostly we associate HPV with cervical cancer. And in recent years, they've launched a HPV vaccine. And that's really having a positive impact on lowering rates in cervical cancer. Not necessarily so much research on the other 5 cancers that are associated with HPV.
Thanks for that background. How did you process this? When you got told that we talked, it was tough, but how did you process it? Were you offered any sort of mental health support? What was offered to you?
I don't think so. I think at that time, I had to get my head round. I had, again, this like sort of like naivety, isn't there, before you go through something like that. It's like, the word anal makes people uncomfortable, or some people uncomfortable. Talking about HPV makes some people uncomfortable. There's a little bit, sometimes it feels to me there's a little bit like, oh, this cancer is okay to have, but this cancer, not so sure about it. So that was really interesting because I'm not somebody to stay quiet. And I'm not someone who feels that I need to make other people feel comfortable. So I'm very happy using the term anal cancer because it's just another body part. You've got an anus, I've got an anus, and you can get cancers in your anus. We need to be able to talk about that. The real focus was on treatment. So after the confirmation of my diagnosis and my stage and what had caused the cancer, the focus really shifted to this is how we're going to treat it. And then moving to an appointment with an oncologist, meeting the team, meeting with the chemotherapy nurse, having the planning meeting for radiotherapy. And at that time, so I'd left my employer in the September thinking that I was going to become a menopause wellness coach after qualifying. And all of that went out of the window really, really quickly. I mean, I suddenly, my situation with my bowels rapidly was deteriorating. So the symptoms that I was experiencing was worsening really quickly by then. So it's always really interesting. They're not so sure about how quickly HPV cancers develop. There's some estimates that it's like can take approximately like 10 years. And then there's other evidence out there about tumor growth can be really quick. There's lots of misinformation and it's really hard to understand what happened. But for me personally, I noticed on the run up to that diagnosis, I was really craving sugar. I was eating like family bars of chocolate, like sneaking them in. And so obviously because my tumor was basically just up my bottom, it was about the size of a 10 pence piece by the time I went for treatment. And so it was blocking the exit. So my symptoms were like an urgent need to had got really small, often diarrhea based. And that meant that obviously leaving the house became quite challenging because I could suddenly really need the loo, like running up the stairs to go to the bathroom. And so when I got to that point of understanding the treatment plan, I was ready. Like I needed treatment to start because it had started to impact my life.
Okay, so before we come on to the actual treatment, you
Mm.
talked about leaving your job there. How did that affect financially? And were you able to access the benefit system? And I know we'll probably open a whole can of worms if we talk about the benefit system, which I'm good to
Yeah.
do because I'm not a fan of it, as you will have heard if you've listened to this before. So how did that affect?
I mean, I didn't. I mean, I was in a fortunate situation because I was preparing myself to become, a freelancer and an independent individual running what I hope was going to be my own wellness clinic. I had saved significantly. So we're in a fortunate position. We don't have a mortgage to pay for. And so at that time, and again, quite naively, I didn't understand, I didn't anticipate the long-term impacts. Couldn't see ahead of where we were, so I didn't access benefits. I found after treatment and, when, I felt like I was back in the world, so to speak, maybe might resonate with you, but that became a challenge then, because I was suddenly like, "Oh, crap, what am I gonna do?" I d w and it was really hard. There's so much you need to do to get yourself through treatment that you can't, for me anyway, I couldn't focus on anything else. It just
Yeah.
felt like this is the mountain that I now have to climb and I've got no choice. Like this is it. This is where my absolute priority has to be. Um yeah, and then everything else, you just for me, we just pushed it to one side. My husband stopped working on the house because, I could live there. We lost our dogs just like in between the planning sessions. for radiotherapy. So suddenly had this grief to go through as well. It was just awful. I can't imagine that there's nobody there. I mean, even just sorry, because now I feel like I'm ranting a bit, but I remember being just even at the meeting with the oncologist, to talk through the treatment plan, and it feels quite abrasive, like you get told to uh, prepare with questions, and then you get in the room and it's really hard to self advocate
Oh,
because, well, for me anyway, I felt like my husband was there. We make notes. We had a book. Someone said like, take a notebook with you, put all your questions in, and we'd come out going, what was that? Did she say that? Is that what your interpretation was? So there's it's almost like this you're suddenly in this storm of information about your health and the journey that you're going through, and you have to select what you can focus on to put yourself in a best place of survival.
yeah, there's a definite power dynamic, isn't there, when you're in that room with your oncologist and you're the one that's looking at them going, "Well, fix me." But then your sort of issues or needs aren't massively taken into consideration. And I know you know, but I'm a member of the board of the International Kidney Cancer Coalition, and I was at European Urology Association conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was invited as a speaker on a panel about shared decision making and how important that is for the patient to level out that power imbalance. And look, we're never going to know as much as the oncologist knows, and I don't really want to, but it it at least gives you a voice of what's important to you. Hearing your treatment's quite specific to get over what it is with your anal cancer, but some cancers, there's treatment options, and there may
Mm,
well be in your case. And some people at different stages of life decide actually what I'd rather have quality of life than go through the hell that chemo and radiotherapy can cast on
mm.
you. I think something does need to be done, and it is in some cancers and with some oncologists about giving that patient voice a little bit more early on.
Or just, I think for me, if I look back and say what would be more helpful, it's that kind of, it's having someone maybe to sit with you afterwards. So you go in and see the oncologist and I get it. The NHS is so swamped. It's completely swamped. They do amazing work. But there's that bit with the human connection. You're taking in so much information, even if it was just a follow up call where somebody says, "Right, after 3 days of an oncology appointment, no matter where you are in that process, if you're in life in remission beyond cancer," even now when I see somebody from the oncology department, I walk away thinking, "That was good news, right? And there's nothing to worry about." He did say August, yeah, for my next checkup. So at that time when you're going still through diagnosis and agreeing the treatment plan, it's a lot. It's so overwhelming because at the same time, you're not in this little bubble. There's lots of people still making demands of you. People with the best of intents asking you, how are you and what's going to happen next? And they're worrying, and you're trying to be like, everything's okay, there's a treatment plan. Or in my case, everything's okay, there's a treatment plan, this is what it looks like. And then I went on. So for anal cancer, there's a couple of forums, and one of them's quite American, and it was awful. Like there's no one in their head making sure that, what Marjorie is sharing is factually correct. And it's her experience, right? And it's their journey and they're sharing it. And I was reading it and I was petrified. I was so horrified about what I was reading in terms of the impact of the treatment, but then also, what was going to happen to me physically. We don't even need to talk about the emotional aspect right now, but like when I was reading on these forums, specifically the treatment for anal cancer and its impacts, I was terrified. And I was crying to my husband and telling my husband that he needed to read it to get himself prepared for what we were going to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how that felt at that time. Here, where you taught the fear that was there was very real, and I think, and no disrespect to anybody who hasn't been diagnosed with a cancer, you can't know what that feels like until you've faced it, and it is really, really difficult. But if we come back to your treatment, you mentioned radiotherapy, and I think there was some chemo involved. What was the plan, and were the sort of timescales?
Yeah, so the treatment tends to stay the same for anal cancer, no matter what stage you're at. So some people will have surgery before treatment, dependent on where the cancer is and if they have a tumor or not. I was fortunate they decided that they were gonna, try first with chemotherapy and radiotherapy. So it's 28 days of chemotherapy and radiotherapy over 5.5 weeks. So that's Monday to Friday. I started treatment on the 9th of December, which meant that I went through the Christmas and New Year period. Again, completely amazed at the NHS that, I didn't have treatment on Christmas Day and Boxing Day or New Year's Day. But because of that, I had treatment, on the Saturdays and Sundays. They're like, "You've got to get the 5.5 weeks done. If there's things like that that get in the way, you come in the next day." And so they start off with chemotherapy by IV, and I think probably that was no words to describe it, is it really? You sat in the chair, this lethal looking injection comes along. It's a specific one type of chemotherapy for anal cancer. It's the only place that it's used. Sat there, it takes a long time to be pushed into your body. And then after that, I had to go down for my first blast of radiotherapy. And then the rest of my chemo was orally twice a day, every day that I had radiotherapy. And I would
Okay.
say, looking back to the first day, I ended up going to A&E. So I got given, actually, I've put it away, but I got given one of the kind of, I think it's by cancer research, like this kind of treatment plan book. And I'd sat down previously with my chemotherapy nurse, and she had written loads of notes in there about the chemotherapy that I was going to take, what to do if certain things happened. And one of them is they keep a close monitor or ask you to keep a close monitor on your body temperature, predominantly for sepsis. Because obviously chemo really impacts your white blood cells and it can weaken your immune system, which means that you can be more susceptible to things like sepsis, and sepsis kills, which is also really, really scary. I don't know whether you came across the whole sepsis conversation and
No, not for
experience.
me, but I've come across sepsis quite a lot in the cancer
Yeah.
field.
Yeah. And so, again, it was just like really, I don't know, but it felt like it was being really highlighted to me. So the first day of having my chemo at the hospital and my radiotherapy, I came home and took my temperature before my next lot of chemo. And my temperature was out of the range. And they have a hotline. You call the hotline, and the hotline was like, because your temperature's out of range, you need to go to A&E. And I was like, "Okay, so now we're at 9 o'clock at night after a really long day at the hospital. I'm now going to A&E." I'm really fortunate. Turned out to be just, my body reacting to a hard day of chemotherapy and radiotherapy day one, and nothing to be concerned about. They sent me home, and I found, before Boxing Day, the treatment was hard going. I felt poorly, I felt weak, I slept a lot, I didn't really leave the house. And I'm very fortunate to have a loving, caring husband that could be by my side and drive me to every radiotherapy session. After Boxing Day, it got real. It went from being uncomfortable and pleasant to being, this is just, I felt like the Walking Dead as it started to take effect, and was just like kind of on this countdown to treatment finishing. But for me, with the anal cancer, there's a period of recovery as well. So the radiotherapy is very effective, but because it's being blitz at your passage, everything you eat and drink has to exit. And so it was extremely painful. I mean, it was horrific. And I found it very challenging to eat. So my chemotherapy tablets you have to take with food. So I was taking them with chocolate milk. After every bowel movement, it would leave me exhausted, feeling quite faint, and I'd hobble back to the bed, and then I would eat jelly babies. I hear this all the time from people who have got this like a classic opinion of what people should eat on chemotherapy. I don't know whether you've come across this, but this whole kind of like, you need to be really nutritious and really focus on your diet and don't eat any sugar because sugar means cancer. And I'm like, have you been on chemotherapy?
Well
Because I'm telling you, you eat what you can.
well, I was just gonna say that. I mean, I've heard the way you describe that. I mean, first of all, I don't think I've ever heard of chemotherapy and radiotherapy running alongside each other. I normally hear of it one and then another,
Yeah.
but that sounds absolute torture to do one alongside the other. And the way I'm hearing you describe it is almost like I'm in the trench for as long as this takes. I'm
Yeah.
in the trench, the bombs are coming in, and I'm just dealing with it as they come. So, yeah, for somebody to say, you need to eat this, you need to eat that, when the reality of it is, I'm going to do what the hell I like during this because, or what I can do. And to eat a jelly baby is stretching it. I'm just about managing. So, yeah, I'll do what I can. Yeah, I hear the
Yeah, I mean,
struggle.
I get it because it comes from a place of positive intent. I do understand it. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you go when you go to radiotherapy, and obviously like 28 days over 5.5 weeks, you spend a lot of time. So again, because I'm having radiotherapy on what's deemed your pelvis area, you have to drink 3 glasses of water before each radiotherapy session. So you're there for like at least 30 minutes because they want your bladder to be full to protect it from the impact of radiotherapy. And so you get to know people, right? Because there's other people there that are having more than 3 treatments, and I can always remember speaking to the prostate cancer guys, and I remember speaking to this one guy, they were a really lovely couple, and they were going home and eating fish and chips afterwards, and I was so envious, because it's not to say that it's not brutal for anyone going through it, and I don't want to compare either because there is this comparison thing that goes on, which is again, it really surprises me. But I just remember just sitting there in radiotherapy going, I would so love to eat fish and chips right now. I would so love
But
that. And
it's the consequence for you though, isn't it? Because of the type of cancer,
yeah,
as you said, it's got to come out somewhere. It's
yeah. And
just like
also
I can't even think about that.
the key because I was having chemo at the same time.
Yeah,
The nausea from that just,
yeah,
it's weird. I even remember I was sharing with someone just the other day that there were still things like chamomile tea, which I used to drink before, I cannot stand. And they were really generous. My friends were amazing. And they sent me these really thoughtful gifts. But any of them that contained anything that smelt so like food or body lotions and bath things, I was like, "Oh god, no, I can't just get it away from me." So it was hard, and my poor husband, there was this one day where I was like, "I really want Jaffa cakes." Anything that you can get in sugar-wise really
yeah.
quickly, to get energy in. And so he bought the, like, family pack of Jaffa cakes, and I ate, like, 4, and then I was like, "Oh, put them anywhere near me," like, I couldn't stand them. I've not ate a Jaffa cake since either, but so it is treatment their treatment was really brutal, and I would towards the end, I'd have to ring radiotherapy and say, "I can't come unless my appointment's in the afternoon. I can't leave the house because my bowels was so erratic and it was so painful." And they were just brilliant. I cannot fault the people that worked at the Royal Berkshire, in the cancer unit in radiotherapy. Every single person was so kind and so humbling and so respectful as well because again, for, my radiotherapy, you're going in, you are getting down to, like, you're having to take off your underwear, putting on what they deem to be paper knickers, which are not really anything, like, it's like a little modesty, but, like, holding up a napkin, and you have to get onto a table, and you have to lie there perfectly still, your bladder's full to bursting and count down the minutes to it's over so that you can, you know, get off the table, go back and put your clothes on and then get back into the car and, go home and then do it all again the next day.
Just relentless, absolutely relentless.
Yeah. And I look back and I still feel really fortunate, Steve. I don't think, oh, it was only 28 days. It was only over 5.5 weeks.
But that's a lifetime when you're in it, isn't it? And I
It
get
is.
that when you look at it from outside, you go, yeah, okay, it's 5.5 weeks compared to the rest of your life. You'd do it every day and twice on a
Yeah.
Sunday, wouldn't you? But when
Oh,
you're
yeah.
in it, it's a
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah, 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 and I think there was a moment for me. I'm, really grateful for doing the work that I've done to become a coach because you look at aspects of breathing and positive mental attitude. And at the times when it was really bad and painful, I would just say to myself, this is a moment, this is going to pass. This is going to pass, and breathing through it and then thinking, "Okay, like, I will get better. This is gonna end." It's
So it did end.
yeah.
Just want to touch on something you said before, or you've alluded to a couple of times, the type of cancer.
Mm,
There's a lot of stigma, isn't there, about certain body parts that we have
yeah,
that we don't talk about in
yeah,
society freely.
yeah.
How did you find telling people that you had anal cancer? What was the sort of reaction you had?
So I don't. But the thing is, like, if you feel ashamed for me because I've got anal cancer, that is your problem. That's not my problem. That's your
Yeah,
problem. If you feel any stigma because I had anal cancer or HPV related cancer, that again is your problem. No one, but like literally, I just think like, why would you think that you couldn't get anal cancer or a HPV cancer? Let's stop the judgment. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it, and I feel really sorry. So there's a lot of anal cancer predominantly has been diagnosed quite late on in life for women. So about 1,000 to 1,500 women or individuals will get diagnosed with anal cancer this year in the UK. So it's a rare cancer. And Macmillan do a really good anal cancer online community forum. Like it's brilliant. Like when I found it, it was like a sense of relief for me.
better than the American one.
Better than the American one, yeah, because, like, Macmillan Care, right? And they are on it, facilitating it, so any posts that are ridiculous, they get removed, and so it's moderated, so it felt much more reassuring, and like a safe place to be, and yeah, and so that was like my safety every day, I was either on there sharing or reading. I was Mrs. Badass. That was my handle name on there. So we're always trying to bring a bit of humor to it. But on there were this the age range is changing, and but you have women in their 60s, 70s being diagnosed with anal cancer. And then I was thinking, imagine that, you're telling your potentially your grandkids, yeah, Nana's got cancer. Where's she got it? She got it up her bum. Well, yeah, you could have cancer in your blood, in your breast, in your bones, in your brain. Why should your butt be any different? It's bizarre to me. And then again, if you talk about anal cancer, and you'll get this when you share this podcast on your normal channels, it will say explicit content because we use the word anal throughout. I understand that because there are other connotations in the way that anal is used that wouldn't be the same if we were talking about cervix or
Yeah.
cervical cancer. So, and yeah, people's reactions, like I got pretty pissy. But like I had this like in my head, the people that are allowed to cry about my diagnosis is me, my husband, my best friend, and maybe my parents, but probably not with me, if that makes sense. Like I wanted to keep the circle tight of like positivity, so when you tell people you've got cancer, like I found it much easier in the end. I just did this social media post because I was just like so over having to deal with other people's reactions to having a cancer diagnosis. Like I can't deal with you being upset for me right now. Does that sound really awful that
No,
I felt that way? But I was
no, I
like,
hear it. I hear it.
I'm trying. Yeah, you're trying to sustain yourself, like, you don't need anyone crying on you, like, this is not the time to be crying, this is the time to be I like the term, I started using it on social media, it's like rooting and tooting. Like, be positive for me, and then you have the people who are religious and faith-based saying prayers for you. I am an atheist, but I really did appreciate those people who said, I'm going to keep you in my prayers and my thoughts. Like, how amazing is that? That there's this really loving side of people who don't know you, but, care deeply and, are optimistic and holding you in their thoughts. So, it's interesting to navigate it. There's a lot of things that I wanted to do. Maybe we should do this at some point, like things never to say to somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer,
Yeah,
that would
yeah,
be really
absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely. So you finish the treatment,
Yeah.
and what happens next? Are you all clear? Did you get that pretty quickly, or what happened?
Pretty quickly. So yeah. So very fortunate. I finished treatment beginning of January. They waited 3 months, I think, for my first PET scan, a CPET scan. And so I had that. And then I had to wait a month to see my oncologist for the results. And that was hideous. I did not deal with it at all well. And we haven't spoken about this, but I heard my cancer isn't a hormone-related cancer, but I decided not to take my HRT, so my hormone replacement therapy, whilst I was going through treatment because I didn't want to do anything that might impact the effectiveness of the treatment plan. So my priority was the chemotherapy working, the radiotherapy working. I'm not going to take anything that might stop that from happening. So I'd come off my HRT and I lost 10% of my body weight going through treatment. Most of that is like muscle as well. So I felt really weak emotionally and physically. And I went for my CPET scan and then waited for a month. And that's when I found Dale Atkinson. And he said, "Oh, you've got scanxiety." I was like, "Scanxiety? This is new." Now it's not so new, but I was really fortunate. So I went to that first appointment and they said that there was no evidence of disease. So the term is NED. But I'm on 5 years of close observation. Last year, I had an appointment every 3 months. I'm now every 6 months, so my next appointment is in August. I either have a scan, so that can be MRI and CT, and a physical examination. So yeah, so it's I would say last year has been this really weird kind of like I don't know. I felt so excited to be alive. Like I had this like renewed sense of the meaning of life, and subsequently found that is also really challenging to navigate because life is just the same for everyone else, right? No one's, it's like no one else is going, look at the sky. The sky is amazing. Like this salad that I'm eating or whatever it is, I don't know. Or like, everyone else is just normality of life. And I found that very, very, very hard. Very hard.
So, how have you managed to sort of rebuild your life? Have you managed to return to work? I know you mentioned before almost and not being able to see beyond treatment. So, how
Yeah.
have you managed to pick up that? Because you said you were in a fortunate position to not need to apply for benefits and that sort of thing. But if you've gone through a long period of time of
Yeah.
not being working and no income, then that's going to come to a point where you need to start thinking, right, I need to do something now.
Yeah, I mean, I would look back and think I should have applied for benefits. The kind of realization of the longer term impact. So I thought maybe once I finished treatment, like I'd be magically me again. And, there's this whole term that we use in the cancer community, which is the new normal, which I hate because it's true. Like I really fight some of this stuff that's going on. And I just found it really difficult. I mean, my confidence completely crashed. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to adapt. And I had certainly a period of time where things weren't normal physically or mentally. And I probably didn't necessarily realize that at the time. So how emotionally unstable I was, how exhausted I was. So, and then people say like, you just need to be kind to yourself. I want to punch those people because I get it. And that's true, right? You do need to be kind to yourself, but it's so frustrating. Like my friend had her 50th birthday in June. I finished treatment in the January and I knew that I couldn't go to her 50th birthday celebrations in Ibiza. I was like heartbroken. And I still know that that's out of my scope of limits. I want to be in bed at 9:30 and I want to be asleep by 10:30. That's not terrible. But and then on the work front, it is challenging. I'm not necessarily, I'm working part-time after having, big corporate substantive roles. And I probably need that to change because I'm not necessarily using my breadth of skills and experience and passion. It's why probably I find supporting the organization Mission Remission, which is how we probably found each other, is so important to me because it gives me another channel to give back.
Yeah, and I guess that's the whole purpose of this podcast, really, recognizing what happens next and this real struggle that you talk about there. And I was just going to come on to sort of how we got to know each other, or contact with each other. I've done a little bit of work with Mission Remission or BBC News and that sort of thing. And then I came across your profile on LinkedIn, and you're now an ambassador for Mission Remission. The work they do is fantastic because it deals with the real of what happens next, and some of the struggles I went through when I was ill, and the finances and the benefit
Mm.
system. It really is difficult, isn't it? And I was at an event the other day at the House of Lords about the Safe Sick Pay campaign that's been going on. And the reality of just that, when you get diagnosed with cancer, the last thing you want to do is go to work or the day after while you're trying to process it. But if you don't get company sick pay, you got it because you can't afford it because you know what's
Yeah, yeah.
coming.
Yeah, yeah.
But now the Safe Sick Pay campaign has been successful in getting an amendment in the Employment Rights Bill to it gets paid from day one,
Yep.
and there's
From the
no
1st of April.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
There's
Just
no
happened.
minimum earnings levels now that you
Yep.
need to earn before you get SSP.
Yep.
And these are all things, and I know Mission and Mission have got their own sort of objectives, which are brilliant.
Yeah.
More needs to be done to help people
Yeah.
after treatment and sort of reintegrate into society because we've been in the trenches for so long, haven't we?
Yeah, and it's hard because how honest do you be with individuals about how you're feeling and the level of fatigue and trying to explain, like, I like to go swimming, I like to walk, that's an important aspect for me of my recovery. But, I also need to be mentally challenged and excited about what I'm doing. And when we look back at kind of, throughout my career, I've always worked in, an organization, either corporate or third sector, so a charity, where they do have an employee assistance programs, where they do have occupational health. And, you have this, I've had very understanding employers. And it was really hard suddenly, like last month I quit my job and now I'm in this situation. um, and it was isolating, and I think there's that aspect as well of have felt very isolated. I didn't properly start work back until November, so nearly, a year after I left my previous employer without any substantial income, but also without any substantial support network. I did get counselling through the Royal Berkshire. I got 6 sessions with them, and that was really really good. Like, I really needed them. Um, but otherwise, you just feel like it's really weird, isn't it? Like, you're on this kind of like treadmill of diagnosis, treatment, in remission. Thank you very much.
Cheerio.
Yeah, cheerio, bye. And you're like, oh, hang on a second. I don't, I don't feel emotionally strong, or I don't feel physically well enough. And people just, well, that's your new normal. I know. Like, we
And
need to have a discussion about this.
that's I don't know about your counselling, and I'm not asking you to go into that, but a lot of the work I do with my counselling is about helping people with cancer especially, but other illnesses and situations too, about finding acceptance of where you are and the situation is because we don't like acceptance. It's not something we particularly want to like. It's understanding things are what it is and
Mm,
what's the way through it. It's like,
yeah.
isn't it, if in this country and this year especially, it's done nothing but rain, we can either sit in the house and say, well, I can't go and do that because it's raining, or we go, I'm going to put my umbrella up and out I go.
Yeah.
That's what acceptance is, finding and adapting and a way through it. And
Mm,
it's difficult. It doesn't just come because a counsellor says you need to accept this. It's
mm,
working on a process of how you accept it and things. And it's I know you said you had 6 sessions of counselling. It was really helpful. That's almost life support, isn't it, in a way, when you're in the time of real need. But when you come out of that,
mm.
there's a struggle to find that support, especially if you've not been working. Financially, you can't afford to go and see a private counsellor probably.
No.
So where then do you find that? And um I'm obviously a private counsellor, I work in a hospice too, and I understand, I see the benefits of people who are able to access counselling beyond that remission and that back to real life, how that can really help them because you start evaluating
Yeah.
everything from life beforehand because who even am I now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I certainly went through, and I'll be honest with you, I went through, I've been with my husband for a long time and happily, and I spent at least 6 months just trying to blow up my marriage. Every 6 weeks or so, I just lose my shit at him.
Well, you see that a lot, don't you, in terms of on the news and things you see when tragedy happens, whether it's somebody dying or an
Mm,
illness, you see how relationships break up. And
yeah,
you think, surely that pulls people together when the real
yeah,
chips are down, but
yeah. And
it's difficult. It's really difficult.
it's hard. I think it's always hard to explain, sort of like, I look back and, like I said, after I got through treatment, and I got my first NED, I was like, "Wow, life is wonderful. It's so precious, and we should make the most of it." And then you look around, and it's still Netflix and Tesco's or whoever your supermarket it is, right? But it is like, that life continues. So this Christmas was like, I put a lot of pressure on Christmas because last Christmas was just hideous. And so this year I was like, Christmas is so special. And if I'd had a job, that paid like my previous salary, I would have, we would have gone on a proper holiday to see Santa or something. That's on the bucket list. But what ended up, my parents went on a holiday and my mum had a fall. And then so I spent January and February and a bit of March spending a lot of time with my parents and but my resilience for dealing that was still quite low. So you have to go from being strong again for other people and then coming back and the reality being is that you're actually not necessarily coping with what's going on because you're trying to be strong for everyone else. And it's only probably in the last 6 weeks, maybe, where I'm like, oh, hang on a second. Am I am I back? Am I here again? As the
Yeah.
readjustment started to happen. But I've
Absolutely.
still got that bit where we all know as well, like the long-term impacts of radiotherapy when you've had so much can be an interesting journey to navigate. So far I'm doing really well, but you just don't know. So you have to for me, I want to keep with a positive mental attitude and having an organization like Mission Remission there helps to normalize some of these feelings. It's a safe community of people who you're creating through this podcast of people who are living with and beyond cancer.
Yeah. I mean, Ali, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure our listeners will be absolutely inspired by what you've been through, the way you've told your story. And yeah, I've heard the troubles and the difficulties that have been there for you, but the sense of positivity that you've come out with and the way you're looking to give back by being an ambassador for Mission Remission. Thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you, Steve, for all the work you're doing as well. It's so important to help people to understand that they're not alone.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, if you want to know more about the services I provide, such as counselling and public speaking, please visit my website on www.stevepointsandcounsellingssupport.co.uk. And I'd also love to hear from you. What subjects would you like to hear about? Where have your struggles been? What do you think people would benefit from knowing about your experience? Please reach out on info@stevepointsandcounsellingssupport.co.uk. So once again, thanks Ali, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon.